Hi, I'm Steve Shapiro, author of Best Practices Are Stupid. And today I want to talk about something that I find really fascinating. My previous book was called Personality Poker. And Personality Poker is a card game that's played with specially designed poker cards. And it helps people understand their personality. In particular, how they contribute to the success of an organization, how they detract from innovation inside the organization. And also, it's extremely useful for helping people to understand who they need to partner with. Now, the mechanics aren't important, but I played this game about 25,000, 30,000 people personally before the book even came out. And when the book was coming out, I decided I wanted to see whether or not personality poker was valid. I knew it was useful. I knew it was useful because people would play it, they would get insights, they would make changes, it would have an impact. But I wanted to see if it was statistically valid. So I hired a guy who is an expert in assessments, all different types of assessments. And I said to him, Michael, I want to determine whether or not personality poker, something which is simple and fun and useful, is actually statistically valid. And he said to me something which I thought was very fascinating, and I will never forget it. He said, never confuse validity with usefulness. He went on to tell me of some work that was done in the area of depression. And what they were doing is they wanted to develop an assessment that would determine if someone is complex. And they spelled if someone is depressed. And they spent millions of dollars trying to figure out if someone is depressed, how do they assess it? And they created these tests. And some of them were exceptionally complex. And at the end of the day, the most useful way to determine if someone was depressed was to ask them, are you depressed? All the valid approaches were useful in some contexts, but for the most part they proved to be less practical due to their complexity, and sometimes they only worked in a vacuum of a laboratory. So anything that you are working on, think about, is it useful or is it valid? You want to create things that are useful. You want to create things that people are interested in. You want to create things that work in the real world. Don't worry about whether it works in the laboratory. And this is the big mistake with a lot of innovation efforts inside of organizations, is they get a bunch of people together inside the company to develop something. They think about it, they try it out, they bounce it off of each other, and inside the laboratory of their company, hey, it looks like it works, it's going to be great. And then they introduce it, and it fails. The reason is that they were disconnected from the real world. They may have had something that was valid. You could create a remote control that has 1,000 buttons on it that will do everything every single person has ever asked them to do. It would be a valid remote control. It would be something that could do anything and everything people want. But would it be useful? Odds are, probably not. One of the things you need to look at is in anything that you're working on, the way you interact with your customers, the way you interact with your employees, how you interact even with the people in your life. Don't worry about trying to get it right. Just try to make sure that it actually works. Getting it right sometimes causes more problems. In fact, the whole concept of perfection is sort of an interesting one. Some people will say that perfection is the enemy of good, or perfection is the enemy of done. And yeah, those are all truisms to some degree, because if we focus on trying to get something perfect, we will never get something done. But I want you to think about perfection from maybe a slightly different lens. I once heard perfection described as something that is achieved when there is nothing no longer to remove, not when there is anything to add. Perfection is attained when there's nothing no longer that can be removed, not when things can be added. So what we're doing is we're bringing it down and boiling it down to its simplest essence. And I actually believe that's when things are most useful. So whatever you're working on, if you have a restaurant and you have a menu, don't try to have a menu that has everything on it. Sometimes the best menus are easy, simple. People can get them. Don't give them too much complexity. Make it as simple as possible, because simplicity is typically more correlated to usefulness. Complexity might be valid, but it doesn't necessarily work. Until next time, this is Steve Shapiro.